Recording now, this is lesson 3.5 on multiplying decimal numbers. Before watching the recording, please make sure that you have a graph sheet of paper in front of you, a pencil, and as well maybe have a different colored pen or pens on hand just in case. If you need to pause the recording to get those items, please do so now. I'm going to continue. Now, for this lesson, we'll go straight into multiplication of decimal numbers. And I just want to review a few points that were brought up, perhaps in a previous year. There are 3 steps that you have to remember when you're multiplying decimal numbers, and I really encourage you to remember these steps. So, the first step, and please jot this down, is to forget the decimal. When you're multiplying with decimal numbers, just don't look at the decimal. You shouldn't be worried about lining up your digits when you're multiplying. Just forget that it's there. Because you're forgetting the decimal, you're going to multiply the numbers as whole numbers. Now, once you've finished the multiplication of the whole numbers, then you move on to step 3, where you place the decimal point back into the final answer based on your estimate. So I'll repeat the steps again. So, number 1, forget the decimal. Number 2, you're going to multiply the numbers as whole numbers. You're multiply it out as you would with whole numbers. And step 3, then you're going to place the decimal point based on your estimate. Now, the reason why we say place the decimal point based on your estimate is that we want to encourage you to place it based on an estimate rather than counting the number of decimal places that you would slot in that decimal point in your final answer, which traditionally you could do, but when you estimate your answer, you also allow yourself to ask if your answer makes sense or not. You're really placing the decimal point meaningfully. So we're going to go through a few examples here, and I'm just going to box this out as well, just as a reminder. Okay, so here's your first question. So what you can do is, after I've written down the question, go ahead and multiply it out as you would. Okay, so question 1. So the first one is 2 6/10 times 1 5/10. Now, before you continue though, I do encourage you to do an estimate. Now, there's 2 ways you can estimate this. You can do a benchmark, or also you can do a front-end estimate. What I mean by a benchmark is, in a benchmark estimate, you would typically follow the rules of rounding. So in this case, your benchmark estimate would be, if you look at 2.6, you would round that up to 3. If you look at 1.5, because the 5 in the 10th spot is 5 or more, you would round that up to 2, and so your estimate for that would be 3 times 2, which is 6. The front end estimate is you're just simply taking the whole number as it is. You don't necessarily follow the rules of rounding. So I can leave that at 2 for the first digit, 2.6. I can round it down to 2, and then I leave that at 1, and therefore my front end estimate is 2. Now, the benchmark estimate, because you're rounding 2.6 up to 3 and you're rounding 1.5 up to 2, you know it's going to be an overestimate. Okay, the front end estimate, because you're rounding the initial round numbers down, it's going to be an underestimate, which means that your final answer is going to have to be between 2 and 6. Okay, so go ahead and multiply it out and forget the decimal. You can pause the recording and do that now. I am going to continue, and I'm going to rewrite this as 26 times 15. So remember that in my first line, what I'm going to do is I'm doing 26 times 5, and in the second line, what I'm doing is 26 times 10. Essentially what you're breaking up is you're breaking up 15 into 10 and 5. Okay, so the first line that I'm going to do is I'm going to go 6 times 5, which is 30. I'm going to carry the 3. 2 times 5, which is 10, plus 3 is 13. Okay, and then I know that I'm going to put 0 down here as a placeholder because my second line I'm going to do 26 times 10. I'm going to go ahead and multiply that out. 260, 0, 9, and 3. Now, what I'm going to ask myself is, where is the decimal point going to go? Well, based on the estimate, remember, we concluded that our actual answer has to be between 2 and 6 based on our overestimate and our underestimate. So, knowing that, what we're going to do is we're going to place the decimal point in between the 3 and the 9 because that would make sense based on our estimate. So our final answer is 3 and 90 hundredths, or 3 and 9 tenths. Okay, here's your second example. Example number 2. So we're going to have 8 and 47 hundredths times 11.2. Now again, we're going to follow the same process as before. I'm going to offer you to do 2 estimates. Now, when you do the estimating on your own, you do not have to do both types of estimates. I'm just giving you options for your estimate. If you do the benchmark estimate, which follows the typical rules of rounding, you know, if you look at the 8, because a 4 is in the 10th spot, you're going to round that down to an 8 if you're following traditional rules of rounding. You know there's a 2 in the 10th spot, so that's going to be 11. So that's going to equal 88. Now, it looks to me that that's going to be an underestimate if we follow a benchmark estimate. Now, what else could we do? Well, other options for front end. In this case, the front end and the benchmark look to be about the same. Okay, so I would say the front end and the benchmark, because you've got the 8 and 4 tenths and 11 and 2 tenths, your estimate is going to be around 88. So go ahead and multiply this out. Remember that you're forgetting the decimal. Pause the recording if you need to. At this point, I am going to continue. So I'm going to treat this as 847 times 112. So you have 3-digit by 3-digit multiplication. You follow the same process. So what you're going to do for the first line is you're going to go 847 times 2. You're simply going to break apart 112. The second line, you are going to go 847 times 110. Okay? Or sorry, not 110. You're going to go 84 times 10. The second, sorry, I'll erase that. You're going to go 84 times 10. 847 times 10, sorry. The third line, you're going to go 847 times 100, because when you add this up, 112 equals 100 plus 10 plus 2, which will give you 112. So the first line, you're going to work from right to left. 7 times 2 is 14, carry the 1. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. 8 times 2 is 16. You know you're going to put 0 down as a placeholder because the second line you're going to go 847 times 10. You multiply it out. 7 times 1 is 7. 4 times 1 is 4, and 8 times 1 is 8. The second line, because you're multiplying times 100, you're going to put those placeholders. Then you're going to multiply. 7 times 1 is 7. 4 times 1 is 4. 8 times 1 is 8. And then you're going to add up your digits from right to left. That's going to be a 4. That's going to be 16. Carry the 1. 1 plus 6 is 7, and 4 is 11, plus 7 is 18. Carry the 1. 8 plus 2 is 10, plus 4 is 14. Carry the 1. And then finally you have that in your final line. Now, look back at your estimate. In this case, we only had one estimate. The benchmark and the front end were pretty much the same. Since since 88 was our estimate, we know that we have to place the decimal point between the 4 and the 8 here. So therefore our final answer is 94 and 864 thousandths. We know that our actual answer is consistent with our estimate. It's around 88. It's in that general area. So we place the decimal point between the 4 and the 8. And that is multiplying decimal numbers. Again, remember these steps. You're going to forget the decimal, then you're going to multiply the numbers as whole numbers, and then place a decimal point based on your estimate. The first thing that you should do is that you should always estimate first. You don't have to do two types of estimates. Estimate however you want to, and then judge from there where you're going to place the decimal point.